And like I mentioned to you, we're here to celebrate. But first, let me introduce you to our keynote speaker, Dr. Shoghi McLean. She was born on March 5 of 1972 in Santo Domingo, in Dominican Republic, and in 1988, Dr. McLean migrated to Cleveland. Both his parents founded and ran a foundation school and home for handicapped children in Santo Domingo. Dr. McLean married Karen Gomez McLean and is raising 3 children, Amanda Sophia, Oliver Salim, and William John. Dr. McLean has been working as medical director at Metro Health Pharma Micro Hospitals in January of 2018, and is an active member of the Club Dominicano de Cleveland, advocating and participating in the Hispanic community of Cleveland. Please put your hands together and welcome to the stage our keynote speaker.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I would like to appreciate the invitation by Chris Martinez and the council members and all the distinguished guests here. So when Chris approached me between the Dominican Festival and Puerto Rican parade to do this, it was kind of interesting that I was asked to talk about heritage. So excuse me, the other events, maybe we repeated some of these elements that I'm going to mention, that I wanted to bring a little bit of background. There we go. So heritage comes from the word patrimony. Patrimony means property that we may inherit, legacy or attributes of a group or society. We find within the definition of the dictionaries that there's like 3 different types of heritage. There's the tangible, you got pyramids in Egypt, you got structures, you got what's left in the culture in many of our countries. You got the intangible, you got the folklore, you have the language, the knowledge, oral traditions that are passed on from generations to the next. And then you have a natural heritage when you talk about the beautiful landscapes of the territories of any country or any region. My heritage, I look American, and I have to shock patients all the time in the hospital because when I walk into the rooms, I talk to them in Spanish when they're Hispanic. And they're going like, I didn't expect you to be Hispanic. So my dad immigrated from the United States, met my mother, and stayed in the Dominican Republic, and it's what I call like gringo platanado, which means he just stayed in. But it's interesting, raised in Hispanic culture, I've always felt to be more Hispanic than, estadounidense, is what we would say in English, because as my wife always clears people, I mean, Americans are not just people from the United States. Americans are people all the way from North America to South America. So it's interesting that when I came to the United States for a rotation in New York, everybody looked at my last name and says, well, you're Irish, you're Scottish, are you going to the St. Patrick's Parade? And I had to ask, already in my 20s, what is St. Patrick's? Because all I knew is that I'm American, or my father's from the United States. But I'm very proud of our Latin and Hispanic heritage. Probably 7 or 8 of my classmates came into the United States together from Santiago, the city where I did my medical training. They always say that I was the most Dominican of all of them, being them, multiple generations Dominican. And it's because we try to keep and make an effort to keep our culture, to keep our language overall. I have friends of mine who were only speaking in English to their children, and I would visit them and say, Shoghi, I'm here to visit. And they would not speak any Spanish, and we're like, well, what's wrong? I remember my clinics in Lutheran Hospital, where out of 35 residents, I was the only Spanish-speaking resident. And I would have Hispanic patients come, and I had a preceptor, and he would call, well, this is McLean's private patients, because I had to translate for him, translate back. And I was very surprised, and I'm talking that I would see, the abuelitas, the aunts, uncles, that were brought for my care to participate in the care in the clinic that we had from Urban Lutheran. And the young people would not speak the language. So it took me a few years to understand that a lot of the early migrations to Cleveland thought that if they gave their children a better English while they were growing up and being raised, they would have better job opportunities. Now we take this 20, 30 years later, 40 years later from those migrations, and we find that the language is actually a plus. So we struggle every day even at home. Our kids are fully bilingual, they read, they starting to learn how to write, but we try to force the Spanish. And it's one thing that we have to think about our future of our heritage is passing that folklore, just not the culture and the language. So it's looking a little bit into the background of this celebration. I was very pleased as I said, well, why is it September 15th through October 15th? For most of Latin America, we know that 12th of October was when Columbus discovered, or a lot of us would say, those pirates from Spain came over to take over the whole continent. But basically, I found that it was interesting that it was a politician in California, George E. Brown, who back in 1968 decided to declare September 15th and a couple days with it as a heritage celebration for the Hispanics. And actually the reason for that is because over 5 countries in Latin America, between them Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua, had their Independence Day from Spain that day. Mexico also had their independence on the 16th, and then Chile. President Lyndon Johnson then declared it as a national event, and after that multiple presidents will recognize it. And then it wasn't until 1988 where Ronald Reagan actually declared that it's a whole month of Hispanic celebration from September 15th to October 15th and enacted this as a law. So it's interesting to see how through the decades the whole movement of Hispanics and Latins have been growing in the United States, and especially in one area more than others. But for all of us here in Cleveland, I can tell you, I moved here to Cleveland and I stayed with my Dominican aunt, my mother's sister, who had raised her family here. And for the 23, 24 years I've been here, it's amazing the transformation that we've seen. When I would tell her 5, 10 years later, I had my own apartment, I got married to my wife, oh, tia, I got plantanos here, I got the sazon here, I'm able to find all these typical foods. She raised her kids on the west side of Cleveland, and now we see that, Latin products are everywhere. Even if you go to a Heinz, you find Latin products. So it's really amazing how our culture, through the food especially, and other things have come through. So going more specific about what is our heritage here in Cleveland, we kind of look at the background. There is no data specifically for Cleveland, but I found that in Ohio, most of the migrations that have come here, foreigners, we have people from India, Mexico, China as being the main foreign-born. Here in Cuyahoga County, we have a majority of African American, as we know, is 46%, 34% Caucasian, and then Hispanics are 12%, and multiracial are a little bit under 10%. So looking at the transformation that we've seen the last few years, 10, 15, or 20 years, we see how Hispanic populations have been growing. And let me share from the Pew Research some interesting facts. We have that in the United States, the largest majority of Hispanics are Mexican, 37 million, according to the 2022 census data. We got the Puerto Ricans, 5,900,000, and then other groups come along, Salvadorian, Cuban, Dominican, Guatemalan, etc. I found really interesting the comparison that was made between 2010 to 2022. We've seen an explosion of immigrants and Latins coming to the United States, coming to the greater Cleveland area. And to give our own example of Dominicans, for example, in 2010, we were 3.8%. It's actually raised by 60%. Other countries like we know, Guatemala, Colombia, our brothers in Venezuela have gone from an increase up to 50%, up to 200% of these immigrations. And what is it? I mean, for most immigrants, most people who come from other parts of the world talked about why you want to leave your home, why do you come here, you know. For some of us, we come for better education, better training, better opportunities, better job opportunities. But we know that a lot of people would think if they could stay in their own home, it would be, you know, their own country with the same opportunities or similar opportunities would be really a blessing to be there. In their warm climate, being there close to their family and loved ones. But we see how Greater Cleveland, being such an inviting community, has exploded. One of our theories personally at home is saying, well, we got the water. There are all these big cities, people are going to be coming to the greater Cleveland area because we have the Great Lakes. But we also see that it's a welcoming community. If we study the history of Cleveland, we see the massive immigrations that we had. All the Eastern Europeans who strolled down the Martin Luther King Boulevard and all the different gardens. How many migrations, how open the city has been. And then we found that for us, the Hispanic community, we've been kind of like the latest wave of immigrants. And a lot of it has to do with social economic events, but we're also open. We're also the region in the country that opened itself to the runaway slaves. So I find that, you know, now I'm seeing the beautiful different colors, beautiful different backgrounds, different cultures. You know, my family and I always enjoy either going to, you know, an Egyptian, Bulgarian, Ukrainian festivals, participate on all the different things that a lot of churches do for fundraising. But now we have, you know, 50 plus years of a Puerto Rican festival. We were proud to start our Dominican festival this summer, and we see how our communities are starting to grow, try to interconnect, try to support each other, because that's what Latins are. This is what our Hispanic. Try to help each other out, try to, you know, rise to the occasion. So going back to our language, this would be kind of like what we have to think for our future. We're proud of our past, we're proud of what we're coming, we're proud of all of our accomplishments, but we have to really keep the youth in mind, the children in mind. Starting by language, let's make more efforts to keep people not knowing just what grandma and Tia, you know, what they cook, what the foods are, and what the dances are, but also keep your language, because language is how your folklore and how your culture, you keep it closer together. And to give you an example, my wife and I, a couple of years ago, we were in the Riviera Maya on a vacation, and we were very pleasantly surprised to see that in that part of Mexico, they're bringing back the Mayan culture. So we had a little kid trying to sell his handicrafts and art, and his father actually had to translate from Maya to Spanish to be able to communicate with us. So it's like, wow, how many, you know, hundreds of years that went by, the suppression of Aborigines and natives in all through Latin America. Now we can see an example like in Mexico, where they're bringing back the Mayan culture, where they're teaching it in the schools as a primary. So this is a nice example. So we have to think about Hispanics, you know, as a melting pot. Everybody, you know, when I get introduced or introduce myself with a Dominican background, I kind of tell them in Latin America, we're all a melting pot. In the same family, you have people of all races, all backgrounds. And this multi-ethnic approach and welcoming of Greater Cleveland is what really makes it a great place to live, you know. We have to forget about labels. We have to forget of, you know, every time we get a questionnaire, are you Hispanic, not white, or are you Hispanic, Afro-American, so I think going forward for our future, identifies as Latin and Hispanics, we have to think of us as only, you know, one race with many different backgrounds, and as in my personal beliefs, we believe, you know, it's one world, mankind and citizens. And, you know, the growth of the Hispanic population will continue to grow. We're headed to be the largest minority in the United States. Like a good Puerto Rican artist that I like a lot, Rene Gomez from Calle 13, Residente, says we're getting everywhere. We're like the ants on the leaves. he has one of his songs where he's talking about how the Hispanics and the Latinos were getting into everything like ants underground. We're being successful in business, being successful in healthcare, being successful in sports, and everything like that that comes through makes us proud of our heritage, makes us proud of our future. So I would like to say that we should, think of our children, think about our opportunities. Let's bring out our families, bring out our friends to get to know our culture and learn about our culture, because